You have questions about understanding alternative financial options. You want to know what the legal aspects are? Well, this is what this episode's all about. Our guest today is Peter Goodman. Peter, how are you?
Good. How are you? It's a nice Saturday, so I'm working from home today. So uh, I like to see that we're both hardworking. So you're all ready to go, and I think you're doing open houses today, right?
Yep, we got a couple open houses, a listing appointment, and sometimes these questions come up, which is what we're talking about right now. Some alternative financing. I'm a little tongue-tied right now. I don't know why. But alternative financing, what should we know legally? And what actually, let's give us examples, basically, of some alternative financing.
Okay. Well, there are lots actually, and people don't really think about it. Sometimes it goes into the think outside the box type of category because obviously mortgages is what most people think about when they think about financing. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to apply to a mortgage company. I'm going to use that money to buy a house. But there are lots of other things. Sometimes you can do something called a purchase money mortgage, otherwise known as seller financing, where maybe the seller can lend you money. Sometimes there's a rent-to-own option you could do. There's private financing options out there. Sometimes you may own another property. You can do a cash-out refinance. There are grant programs that provide grant funding to people. There are also some new companies out there that I have been seeing. I don't see them as much in New York, but it may work for you if you're selling, and they will possibly be out in New York. And that are these cash offer companies that will actually buy you a property that you're buying all cash, and then lend you money. So this way you can compete with other all cash offers. And then there are certain underwriting that you can do where you can underwrite the property up front, the mortgage up front. So you also may give you an option for an all cash type of offer as opposed to traditional financing.
Let's talk about the pros and cons. What's the biggest advantage and potential drawbacks for alternative financing options for a legal standpoint?
Well, they all have, it depends on which ones we're talking about, but they all have the pros and cons. So let's go through them a little bit one by one, if you're okay with that. I think it might be better visually for people. So a purchase money mortgage or seller financing is where you buy a property and the seller is willing to give you their own mortgage. The positive of that, of course, is you don't have to get pre-approved. You just work out the deal with the seller. Maybe you just put down your regular down payment, so whatever that is, 10%, whatever, 20%, whatever that is, and you put that money down, and you give it to the seller at the closing, and they give you mortgage back. The negative to that is, one, sellers who are giving you a financing don't usually want to do it long term. They're not going to give you 30 years like a bank is going to give you. What they may give you is 2 to 5 years, or more likely 1 or 2 years that they're going to give you. Also, they may want more money down. So in a regular financing, you may be able to put down on an FHA loan, for instance, 3.5%, VA loan 100%. But in seller financing, they usually want at least a decent chunk of money up front. They also may want a higher interest rate because they want to make money off of you more than they would if they just took the money and put it in the market. And of course, convincing a seller to do that sometimes can be a challenge. A rent-to-own is another option, and the benefits or the risk there is a lot of times with a rent-to-own, if you can't ultimately buy the property, so that's the situation. You rent the property for, you say, for a year, and then at the end of the rental period, you can either buy the property at fair market value or have a right of first refusal to buy the property, or you may have a right to buy the property at a fixed amount of money, and some of your rent may go towards paying the down payment on that property. But if you then ultimately can't buy the property, you may end up getting evicted, or you may lose a significant amount of that money if you just can't get your mortgage, or you can't get the financing after that year, or something changes. That's your risk there. Then you have some of these private financing deals. You see them more in investment properties, or you see someone that maybe, has a lot of means to borrow money from financial institutions. Oftentimes those rates may be higher. There may be a lot more points up front. The term is not as great. So some of those risks are built into private financing. If a private person is lending you money, and they know you may pay it off in a year or 2 years, they're going to want a premium on that, and so they're going to have a prepayment penalty where you might not have a prepayment penalty on most fixed or even adjustable rates with an institutional lender. Then you have some of these other programs. You have a grant program. Let's say I can talk a little bit more about that as we go, but grant programs oftentimes are programs like Long Island Housing Partnership, or there's the CDC Long Island. There's Community Housing Innovations in Westchester. You have NHP, neighborhood housing projects in New York City. But there's oftentimes a lot of these grants where they'll actually give you free money. Number one, you have to qualify because you may have to be in a certain area, or you may have to have a certain income limit. But the problem with some of these grant programs is, number one, while you may not have to pay it back ever, you may have to live in the property for a certain period of time before the money goes away. So they may say, look, we'll give you $75,000 to pay your down payment, and if you live there for 20 years, you never have to pay it back. But if you don't, there's a sliding scale that you have to pay back. You also may have a big problem refinancing. If you want to take a cash out refinance or an equity line, you have to deal with the fact that you have this lien on the property that's a grant up until it disappears. Then you have the other thing that we were talking about was cash out refinancing. That's what a lot of people do. So they'll say, look, I own a house, it's pretty much no mortgage on it. I'm going to refinance that house, and I'm going to buy this other property. Well, that's great, but the only issue is that depending on, you may have to have a certain amount of equity in your existing home, but also you're now putting a lien on your existing home. So if you're buying the next property as an investment, you may want to think about whether you want to risk your own house for the investment if you can't pay the investment back, because you still have to pay the mortgage. So those are some of the risks that would be associated with these other financing structures.
Looking at some questions that are coming in. Legal protections. What legal protections should someone look at when they're considering alternative financing for their home purchase?
So legal protections. I mean, look, there's generally going to be a lien placed on the property. So mortgage generally has a lien. You want to make sure that you understand this is a prepayment penalty. You understand if there's an adjustable rate. You understand that there are points, meaning points usually represent 1% of the loan amount. So you need to make sure that if you don't make those payments, you understand what the risks are. So some of the protections that you might place in, you may have, let's say if you do private financing, you may have the right to a certain extension where you may have to pay for it, but you can extend it for another year if you can't afford to make the payment at the end of the term. Or a prepayment penalty. You may say, look, I know you're charging me 2% if I pay this early because you want to make your money, but some of them, for instance, will have a prepayment penalty that's no matter when you pay it. So you have to think about, well, if I'm going to refinance this, or I'm going to sell this property and I'm going to pay off the loan during at least the last 60 days, I shouldn't have a prepayment penalty. They should waive that or reduce it. So those are some of the legal protections you want to think about. You want to think about what happens if you don't pay. Do they foreclose? Are there other options? Are there rights to cure? So if I'm late on my mortgage or I'm late on that payment, do I have a certain period of time in which to fix that problem so I don't go into foreclosure, I don't get sued, I don't lose my asset? So those are some of the legal protections that you want to think about.
All right. So my next thing is basically common mistakes. You just mentioned a lot of them. What are some of the common legal mistakes people are making with alternative financing, and how can they avoid them? You already mentioned basically pay attention to the details, talk to your professionals and stuff like that. But what else would you want to add to that?
So common mistakes that people make is they don't really. You need to do an analysis of what your best options are. People think about, well, this is great, it gets me into the property, but it may not be the best option for you, but it also may not be a good deal. It could be a bad investment. So you want to make sure. So for instance, let's say seller financing. Common mistake some seller financing may make is they don't really think about what the value of the property is. So you may be overpaying for the property because nobody did an appraisal. So you didn't really think about doing the appraisal. Another common mistake I see, like in the purchase financing, is that title insurance. So if you're the lender and someone says to you, and you own a house, and someone says, I'm willing to buy your house, can you give me financing, right? And you agree that you're going to take, let's say 20% up front, and then you're going to give them a mortgage back. Well, you should get your buyer's going to get title insurance. You should get mortgage insurance at that point through the title company, because if there is something happens, I had a case like this recently where someone committed fraud, and the documents were never recorded. The purchase money, the mortgage never recorded that this buyer who bought my client's property never actually had their title company file the mortgage against the property, and then they took out a cash out refinance on the property 6 months later, and now it wiped out that seller's mortgage. And if they had mortgage insurance, they could have been compensated for that fraud that occurred. So those are some of the protections. There are a lot. Reading the fine print, like you said, I mean, each one of these programs we've talked about, even the grant programs, there is fine print, like I said. You want to make sure that you understand what documents you are going to need to have and to save if you have a grant program. So when you eventually sell or look to get more traditional financing, you have those documents, so number one, how to order a payoff, and what that's going to cost you, and you know how to calculate what those numbers are going to be.
All right. You know what? You kind of already mentioned the cautionary tale. I was going to ask you to talk about that, but you already discussed that. So I guess the last thing that we want to talk about is one key piece of advice that we can offer people. If you can give anybody a piece of legal advice when it comes to this particular topic that we're discussing, what would it be? And also leave your contact information so they can get back to you if they have any questions.
Well, the simple thing is speak to a lawyer and speak to an accountant and speak to a realtor, right? You want to speak to I do a lot of presentations about the team concept of real estate. If you're not doing this every day, and nobody can be a jack of all trades, you need to make sure you have the right real estate professionals. You need to make sure you have the right financial professionals, because especially with alternative financing, there can be a lot of pitfalls when you're dealing with private individuals or you're dealing with corporations that may not be the most reputable and you don't realize it, or issues with the property that you wouldn't have thought of, but your lender may have thought of it if you were going to, Citibank or something. So you want to make sure you have the right team in place, right? Have right attorneys to review your documents, have the right realtors to go over the comparable market analysis, make sure you have the right numbers, that you're focusing on the right numbers. Accountants, make sure you understand any tax ramifications. That's what I would strongly advise. Now, my firm is a firm called Berger, Fisher, Schumer, Wexler, and Goodman. I am a partner in the real estate, and I'm a partner, but I had the real estate department. But we get involved with all sorts of issues, and that's what we look to do. We look to help our clients, and by our experience in all these other areas, not just real estate, we try to put together the best process for you to make sure that your rights are protected. The best way to reach me is you can call our office. You can dial. We're in Long Island and New York City, but Long Island number is 516-747-1136. You can reach both offices that way, and you go to www.bfs, like B as in boy, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, .com. That's our website, or you can just email me simply at re as in real estate at bfslawfirm.com, B as in boy, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, lawfirm.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for your time and your expertise on this. I just want to say thank you to Peter for always, anytime I want to do one of these videos, he's always available. He makes time basically to make these videos. So please utilize his expertise when you see these videos, you have questions or you have friends or family, share this with them and, utilize his expertise. I'm a real estate agent here in Queens, Long Island, Brooklyn, and Bronx. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, I can help you with that. If I can't help you, I can point you in the right direction at least. You can give me a call at 917-975-5985. You call me on my office line, which is 718-475-2760. Our website is mynyhomesales.com. If you have any questions, scenarios, look, we're just a call away. We don't bite much. Just give us a call. we're here to talk. We're here to basically help as many people as we can. So if we can help you, great. If not, well, we can at least point you in the right direction. Again, if you any questions you have, any scenarios you're going through, we can't help you unless you ask us those questions so we can, point you in the right direction. I keep saying the same thing, point you in the right direction. Whatever it is that you're looking to do, we can point you in the right direction, but you have to call us, talk to us, and we can help you with that. With that being said, I hope you got some value out of this. Feel free to contact us when you can. And leave your comments below. If you have any scenarios that you want us to discuss on future episodes, let us know.